Just Fix It in Post is fueled by the donut.
Oh, look at that. It's an old-fashioned.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, I got exactly what you said.
What's that?
I got exactly what you said to get.
I love it. That's perfect. Okay.
And you just eat it. And, you know.
And it makes a mess.
It does make a mess. Oh, good, though.
Oh, there's a lemon.
Mm-hmm.
Solid.
A little bit of lemon cake there.
That's really good.
I like the chocolate.
I'm not a chocolate person.
And why is that?
Don't know. I prefer like other fruity things, so lemon is perfect. Some people don't like fruit.
And the old-fashioned spin?
I mean, this is probably worse for you than that one because it's denser.
Cake, I guess, versus
Cake.
yeast.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all horrible for you.
They are really, truly all horrible for you.
Yeah.
And I probably can't eat a whole one in one sitting.
Yeah. No, but
Oh, but man, that's good.
how's it compared to all the other donuts you've had?
I don't really count myself much of a donut connoisseur, but they're good.
They're all I can eat. Of course, I did decide to start the day with an everything bagel, which was
Oh.
great for my teeth on the way over. Because I had everything in it.
Everything.
Everything.
All the things.
I never eat breakfast, so it worked out.
You don't eat breakfast?
Or lunch. I just eat whatever I want for dinner. And then,
Don't you get like a headache during the day?
No, I like to go to sleep with a full stomach.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm the
knock me out.
opposite. I can't. Here, I'm just going to put it on the top here.
Well, that's fine, because this is in the shot, so.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Well, I was going to go back to that.
Oh, yeah.
Like later.
Oh, perfect.
Okay.
There we go. Okay. Okay, perfect. All right.
Where's the milk?
That's a whole other sponsor.
Cool.
Whether you're law enforcement doubling down on tradition, a multitasking parent seeking some sweet silence, or a producer looking for a morale boost on set, get The Donut. For the sweetest updates, you can follow them on Instagram at The Donut San Pedro. Located at 1615 South Daffy Street, 562-881-0656. Get The Donut. Serving San Pedro for the last 45 years. The Donut. Damn, that's good. Just Fix It in Post.
Okay, this is a career.
Things like creative directors and approach.
Wow.
Fucking A. I am absolutely there. Clients wanting more for less. Dude.
This mix of creativity and technology.
We've heard around the world. People were freaking out.
Welcome to Just Fix It in Post.
Industry insights straight from the source.
I'm your host, Sean Rice, and welcome. She writes about cars, talks about cars, and when she's not doing that, she's probably wrenching on one. A writer and video host who's reviewed more sheet metal than a body shop. She's just as comfortable off-roading in a Montero as she is tearing up a track in a European sports car. Her superpower? Parallel parking like a boss. And somehow, folding a fitted sheet without losing her mind. Before writing about horsepower, she was writing made-for-TV movies, proving she knows how to tell a great story, whether it's on the screen or behind the wheel. Buckle up for Lyn Woodward!
I thought it was exciting.
You sound very excited, and you make me sound way more impressive than I think I am.
I mean, you say that, but like I see you on Instagram and I feel like you come across as being like, you handle yourself so well on camera that it seems like you've been doing it forever. And I always think like, oh,
I kind of have. I mean, I was an actor when I was a kid. So I started working when I was 7 years old. I wasn't much of a kid, I guess.
Really?
The kid era ended quickly. Well, when you're doing that kind of stuff, I grew up in Los Angeles, and when you're doing that kind of stuff, like you're a professional. Like you have to know your lines, you have to hit your marks, you have to be on time, you have to not have a hissy fit like you just have to kind of be a grown up. And so at 7 years old, I thought I knew what it meant to be a grown up.
so you were a child actor into
I was 14 when I really stopped.
Really? Oh, interesting. I started in high school acting classes.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like improv, all that stuff. I loved it.
I don't know, but that's probably a wiser way to do it, because I think at least in high school you have a little bit more knowledge of the world, maybe you have, I think you have a better understanding of what it means to be responsible and that things have repercussions, and maybe a little, I'm not saying like by vast, quantities, but certainly more than you do when you're 10.
Totally.
Looking back on that experience in hindsight, to me, I think the biggest problem that I had, and maybe other kids experience this, is you're asked to be a professional on set and at work. And then I would come home and then suddenly it was like, well, make your bed, clean your room, do that. And I was like, the fuck? Like, who are you telling me what to do? I'm paying the rent,
Right.
Like, I'm making the money. And so I think there was this whole idea of, I think when a kid is asked to sort of act like an adult, they don't know that it means paying your bills and cleaning your house. And they think it's smoking, drinking, going out clubbing, drugs. Like, that's what they think, like, because that's what they see on, TMZ or whatever it is. And so I think you have this kind of warped sense of stuff, which is why you saw, Drew Barrymore at Studio 54 when she was like 8. It's kind of warped. And if you don't have a parent who's there telling you, no, your bedtime is 10 o'clock or 9:30 or whatever, and enforcing that, then there's an opportunity to get really messed up. Because a lot of the parents too, and I think a lot of the parents were like living vicariously through their children and enjoying the notoriety and the fame, probably more, and like feeding off of their kids, which is horrible. So consequently, a lot of people that I worked with when I was younger are in a bad way now, if they're even still alive. So yeah, I think acting when you're an older person is probably the better way to do it.
Yeah, for sure.
Or also,
I can't imagine doing it now, though.
I mean, I can't either. I think there's such a weird blur between acting and celebrity. It's like influencer versus actor. And I think I have such, respect and admiration for those who see it as a craft and who work at their art and all of those kinds of, buzzwords that you use, instead of, hey, I have a big following on Instagram and that's going to get me a part in a movie. Which I guess they both happen. And I'm not saying that I think like the Instagram way is not hard work. I'm terrible at Instagram because it takes so much time to really curate it properly and do it well. But I guess I'm just old school. And I think, well, go take an acting class, go do theater, go work at it.
So you're not doing the Instagram and the YouTube now because of the stigma associated with it, or is because you don't want to?
No, I'm lazy. And it's not even lazy. It's just that it's a medium that I don't necessarily like. It's fine. It's great. Sometimes I completely forget to do it. It's not something I grew up with. It's not something that was just sort of I think when you're younger and you grow up with that, it's just sort of in your DNA at that point to be like, oh, I gotta do an Instagram thing. I'm trying really hard to sort of be more in the moment and worry less about the phone and less about the pictures and I'm definitely not an influencer. I don't have like tens of thousands of followers. And so, I think it's nice that people are interested. I kind of sometimes don't know why they're interested. Like, I don't think I'm that interesting a person on a lot of levels. I think there are way more interesting people out there, but I do it as a sort of a byproduct of my job. But then there's this part of me that thinks, as soon as this job is over, I cannot wait to just like shut it down and get one that's just a quiet, private account just for my friends. I'm looking forward to that.
To get out of the thick of it. So how did you even get into this? Where did you start? Because you were
honestly,
where'd you grow up?
I grew up in LA. I was born in New York City, but I moved here when I was like 3 years old. So I don't even really have memories of New York as a child. So, yeah, I grew up here and was an actor and went to school, and then at some point decided, I kind of don't really care about it. My parents were, dancers on Broadway, and so they were very show businessy people, and so I kind of came by it naturally, but there were other things that were more interesting to me. I wanted to be a writer. I kind of had started working on writing when I was a kid, and I thought it was cool, and I never thought I was smart enough to do it, because I always thought, oh, you have to be really smart to be a writer, and I thought it sounded like a very glamorous job. But I wanted to go to college and just be a normal kid, and so I did that and went to grad school and have an MFA in creative writing. And
Where'd you go?
Mills College in Oakland. It's actually closed now, but I have no experience doing anything. Like, all I've done is go to school and was an actor when I was a kid. So I got a job in advertising, and I worked at an ad agency I worked in advertising for 15 years. And while I was sort of in that process, I kind of got back into writing, and I started writing really terrible movies and spec scripts, and because I thought, well, what are you doing? You're just going to work in advertising now for the rest of your life? And I was an account executive. It's not like I was writing copy for amazing ads or anything. I was a suit, which was great, and I had a ton of fun. But then that kind of that seed that was planted a long time ago of the desire to be a writer, it started nagging at me. And so I started doing that. And I was in San Francisco at the time, because that's kind of where I went for grad school. I went up north, and then moved back down here and tried to make it as a writer in the movie business, which is unbelievably difficult to do unless you know somebody. It's really, really hard to get into. And so I had a friend who's like, well, just go do some freelance stuff and dip your toe back into advertising, and for a couple days, make a ton of money. I was broke. 5 years into wanting to be a writer, and I was literally on food stamps. I was on Medicaid.
How old are you at the time?
I was 45 years old. I had $100 in the bank. I had started over when I was 40. I left advertising, and I'm like, look, if I don't do it now, I'm never going to do this. So do it. And I just jumped off the cliff. And 5 years in, I was broke. I had no money. I had $100 in the bank. My parents were like, we can't help you anymore. You're done. It was either sell my car or live in my car. And I had lunch with a friend, and she gave me these 3 people to call. And she said, go freelance. Just go do a couple of days of, project management work in advertising. And 2 of the 3 people that she gave me numbers to hired me. One of them was for 5 days at Deutsch Advertising. The other one was at a place called the Enthusiast Network. And I was like, I don't even know what that is. What is that? And I told the lady, I'm like, I don't think I'm who you're looking for. I'm an agency person. And she was like, no, you're great. You're smart. She didn't even meet me. We just talked on the phone. She's like, nope. You're fabulous. I need someone for 5 months. I'm doing an on-site activation for Infiniti, the car company, for this event called the Concours d'Elegance. And I was like, well, that sounds fancy and nice. Okay, I'd never heard of it before. I like cars. Okay, great. And I got a job there. And it just my world just got turned upside down in the best way possible.
Were you writing screenplays? Is that what you were doing?
Yeah. So while I was at the Enthusiast Network, just an old contact had reached out and said, hey, I had this connection at Mar Vista, which is a production company. And she said, hey, you should, pitch some ideas for some movies. And so I had a writing partner at the time, and she and I got together, and it was one of those places that, that produces sort of really super low budget, those Christmas movies that Hallmark does, and, murdery, dramas and, weird rom-coms. And so we just pitched her a bunch of ideas, and they bought a couple of them. And so, yeah, there are 3 movies that I've written that are out there that have been produced, which is amazing. And I think that's when I thought oh, this is great. I've made it. I've had a movie made. So of course now all the offers are just going to flood in. And it it does not work that way.
So you were working in advertising as account exec.
Yeah.
And then at what point did you start writing screenplays? Was that after?
I was writing while I was working in advertising, but it was really just, writing stuff that was just trying to figure out how to do it. I know people, go to movies and they're like, that thing sucked. Like, I would have done such a better job. And I think I love that illusion, but it's really hard to write a very good script that's tight, that, where every single thing moves the story forward and you don't have, there's just not a lot of extra stuff. I can't tell you the number of people who said, hey, would you look at my script? And I have to ask people now. So I will only read something if I really believe that someone is serious and actually wants feedback, because I'll ask them, I'll say, do you want me to just tell you how great you are, or do you actually want notes on the script? Because it's a really hard process, and I don't even feel like I do it all that well still. And I'm still doing it, and I'm still, I'm still working, but it's a little unfulfilling when you're just kind of writing and like nothing happens with the rest of the process. You send it to a producer and they say, oh, this is great, make this change, and this change, and this change. And then you make them, and then they're like, it's good, but we're going to pass. And then you hand it to somebody else and they think, this is great, just make these bunch of changes. And that kind of still goes back to where it was at the beginning, or completely changes the makeup of the story. And then it's like, I think I'm, we're going into a different direction, or whatever it is. And you hear these stories like, oh, it takes 10 years to get a movie made. And it's not a joke. I mean, that's for real, that you have this, you can have a great idea. You can even have a pretty decent script, but then everyone has to kind of pee on it to make sure it's like theirs a little bit. They probably ruin it a little bit in the process. Sometimes people will make it better, for sure. It was too slow going for me as someone who has to pay their mortgage and their bills, like, by themselves. Like, it's kind of like, okay, I need to eat, and you not paying me, like, I can't, it's not a sustainable, business model for me. Sorry. At that point, I didn't really care what I was writing. I just wanted to be a writer. And like I said, I loved cars since I was a little kid. And when I got introduced to these editors of car magazines, and it wasn't just Motor Trend, but it was Automobile and, Truck Trend and Hot Rod and all of these like really cool different publications that I thought, oh my gosh, like I had never put two and two together. Like, oh, you can write about cars for a living. And again, I thought, well, I'm not smart enough to do that. I don't have the subject matter like expertise. It turns out when I started, there weren't a whole lot of women in the business. There are much more now, which is great, but there weren't a whole lot of women who were writing for car magazines. And really the main criteria is you need to be a good writer. You can learn about cars, but I think it's much harder to take a car person and teach them how to write than take a writer and teach them about cars. And I had already had a passion for it. I already loved it. And so for me, it was just a matter of getting that kind of institutional knowledge about cars, like taking a deeper dive into them.
So what role did cars play in your life that kind of made that connection?
When I was growing up, my dad had some amazing cars. He was a kind of a car nut too, and he had a couple of Porsche 356 Speedsters when I was a little kid, one that kind of got blown. You get excited because everyone thinks about their value now. Like, they were not, like, no, he bought them. I mean, this would have been in the 70s and, like the 70s and 80s when you could buy one for like, $3,000. And I remember like there was always this spot right at Mulholland and Laurel Canyon. And it's still there. This just sort of like patch of grass right at the intersection. And I remember the car was just sitting up there on this patch of grass with a for sale sign in it, and people were just driving by it. And, but that, again, that was back in the day when you could just sort of hand somebody a bag of cash and be like, okay, I'll take it off your hands. And so the first one that he had, it burned in a house fire that we had. And then he bought another one. He bought so his first one was just like this really pretty white color. And as a little girl, I was like, so cute. It's like this little tub or like a big bar of soap. And it was, this convertible that I could sit in the back and just kind of be like, a little, this little sort of princess getting driven around. I was not a princess, but I just loved them. And he had a vintage Mercedes, and he had a VW Squareback, and he just had these great, these kind of great cars. And I loved the idea of driving because I was a really independent kid. Obviously, I was working from a very young age, and it kind of meant, well, I can just get in my car and go anywhere and kind of do whatever it was that I wanted. And I think when I was 12 or 13, my mom drove, she had a Corolla SR5 hatchback, 77, which is a white car. I loved that car. And I would sit in the right seat. And at one point I just told her, I said, teach me how to shift. I want to do the shifting on this thing. And so she would tell me, which gear, and okay, now put it into third. And after a while, I would start to hear the engine, and she wouldn't even have to tell me which gear to put it in. I would just sort of know. And I was just a really young person. So I think it's just always been in my DNA a little bit. I've just always loved cars. And it's not like my dad wrenched on them or anything. He, took it to a guy, and the mechanics of them didn't get interesting to me until I bought my own first classic.
And what was that?
It was a 1966 Datsun Roadster, a 1600 Roadster. And it was great. I got to work on it, and I feel like every time I got it fixed, it was in great shape when I bought it, but every time I got it fixed, then something else would break on it, and I was like, oh, okay, I guess.
It's the journey, right? Like
it was the journey.
But how old are you when you started wrenching on them?
My late 40s.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So yeah, that was the first time I'd ever bought a classic car. All my other cars had sort of been beaters up to that point because I had never had any money. But yeah, I loved working on that car. And I think when you do work on your car, you have this sort of deeper understanding and this bigger knowledge of it. And so your connection to it is probably a little more, a little stronger. I don't think, though, wrenching on cars is a requirement to be a car enthusiast by any stretch. I think if you like cars, you're an enthusiast. And I don't care if that's just like, oh, like that one looks cute. If you like them, that's enough. I don't feel like there's this massive thing where it's like, well, no, you need to know like if it's carbureted or fuel injected. It's like, I don't buy into that.
So what's been your journey? You started writing for...
Yeah, I started writing for, I got my first gig writing for Roadkill, which was awesome. And then I worked a lot with Automotive magazine, which sadly is no longer, which sucks. I loved the vibe of that magazine. Yeah, the truck group there, the guy who used to run the truck trend, and they were awesome to me. And I remember pitching a story about I think it was the new Power Wagon. It was the new Ram Power Wagon. And this guy's like, great. He's like, take one, go out to Sedona, Arizona, and meet with this woman named Nina Barlow, who is like this rock star, like off-road instructor and recovery. Like she's like just like one of the best people in the world who know about off-roading and who know about, recovery and stuff, and go interview her and do a story because she also drives Power Wagons and is sponsored by Stellantis. And so I drove out there and I met this woman, and she really, she taught me how to off-road. And I've loved adventure. I've loved being outdoors. But then you kind of put that together with the driving element and going off-roading and rock crawling. And I was just like, wow, like, what is this? Like, it literally just like fed every part of me. And that was really the beginning of my, any kind of off-roading experience I have, and now I do off-road, rallies, and I've competed like all over the world. Like, it's weird. It's just weird to think that it wasn't really that long ago. I got my start in this business 10 years ago this year. So it's exploded in a way that I never thought it possibly would, but I think that's just one of those lessons. It's like, it's never too late. You know what I mean? Like, don't think you're dead yet. Like, you're not. And I think that's been the biggest joy for me is, it makes you feel young when you are learning something new and you're doing something different. And it was hard. I'm not going to say that it wasn't. I'm fortunate because I don't have a family. I didn't have a massive amount of responsibility fiscally to other people. It allowed me to do that. But I feel really fortunate that I had a chance to do that. Because I have friends who are like, oh God, I'm still in advertising and it's like sucked the life out of me, and this is not what I really love to do. And you can see that they feel kind of trapped, and I hate that for them. It's hard.
It's like its own mafia. I mean, unfortunately, it's really like this own like gang of like, and they're all kind of competing against each other for this, that, and the other thing. And it's, it's exhausting. It for sure is. But, when you win and you're there and you're doing it, it's awesome. It's great.
Yeah. The highs are high, but the lows are low. And I think it's just a very, it's really challenging work. And you don't know that it is until you're many years in, because at least, the agencies that I worked at were amazing. Like, I worked at Goodby Silverstein and Partners, and I worked at Chiat Day, and I worked on amazing accounts that, again, sent me all over the world on these like incredible things. And they make it really fun, and they make it really it's really cool. But at the same time, there's this thing that just is sort of it's like sucking the life out of you too. And as an account person, it can be a really thankless job, because you're just basically the human punching bag. It's like, you're not making this person happy. You're not making this person happy. But you have to figure out a way to make everybody happy. And there were a lot of challenges about it, but I learned so much about how to deal with human beings working in that industry. How to communicate differently to different people, right? Because what you say to a client is not what you say to your creative team.
Totally.
So it really kind of taught me how to talk to people where they are, which is really important, because otherwise things can get lost.
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge dog and pony show that people have to go through.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I'm familiar with all the hoop jumping. I feel exhausted after.
Yeah, it's a lot.
One day they're calling you 20 times a day, being like, "You're right. You need this. You be able to do this. Change this. We do that. Do that. Sure.
Make the logo bigger."
The next day you called me, you're like, "So can we? I was just wondering about that payment. I'm sorry, who are you? That's still how it is. Like, you're what? No, and then they don't respond to the emails.
Yeah.
No, you were yesterday, sir.
Yeah.
With someone else today. So you're doing that, and then you transition into what's kind of the phase of each. You're writing, and then you're on camera now.
So I was working as a project manager at the Enthusiast Network, and they actually wanted to hire me full time, and I said, "Thank you so much. That's great. I appreciate that, but I'm a writer, and this is what I do now, and this is what I want to do." And one of the editors there was just like, "Hey, like, you like cars. Have you ever thought about writing about cars?" And I thought, well, yeah, like, that sounds amazing. And so I was freelance for about a year and a half, writing for, literally anybody that I could get on the phone. And it was, again, I think at the time, there were not that many women writing. Right. And so I don't know that it was as much that I was a novelty, but it was like, oh, hey, like, yeah, like, we could use a woman's voice in this field of dudes here. And so I got hired pretty quickly just for freelance gigs by Motor One, by The Drive, by Overland Journal, by, just like a bunch of different, but Truck Trend hired me all the time to freelance. And it was terrific, because I was sort of honing my skills, and I had a couple of people who were really generous, and I would send them my stuff and be like, could you please make sure that I don't sound like a complete idiot? And they'd be like, okay, well, this is the right idea, but you kind of said it in a weird way that's not accurate. And it was on some level like learning how to speak a new language, because I knew the stuff, but I had never spoken about it in a technical way before. And so there was a very steep learning curve. It's funny. It is definitely a male-dominated business, but I feel like being a woman was a massive advantage for me because there weren't many of me. And I think, if I were a guy, it would have been like, hey, buddy, the line forms to the rear and it's like 200 people deep. So it was, I think in that way, it was really terrific that it just opened a lot of doors, and I was really eager to learn and knew that I still, again, 10 years in, I still feel like every once in a while I'm a kind of a pretender a little bit. I have that thing where I'm like, oh, I can't believe I said that like that. Like that just makes me sound like an idiot. But after like about a year and a half, a friend of mine who I knew, she's like, Kelly Blue Book is hiring an on-camera video person, and she's like, I'm in the running for it. She was a photographer, and I was like, oh, that sounds awesome. And in the back of my head, I'm like, damn, that job sounds like it would be amazing for me, but I didn't pursue it because she had...
You're like, hey buddy, the line?
Seriously. She had told me about it in confidence, and so I didn't pursue it. And I was like, oh, okay, that sounds like... Only because it literally put together every single thing that I had ever done in my life into one job. And so I did nothing about it. And I think I went on it was like a day after Thanksgiving, and it was a post-Thanksgiving day, like guys who own Porsches drive with Porsche. And there was this one guy he was like basically the executive editor at Kelly Blue Book, and he was there with his son, and I was there with my friend Derek Powell, who everybody knows somehow. You probably know who he is. And we were driving, and this guy's son later on that night, this is the editor at KBB, said, hey, why don't you hire Lyn for that? And he had just met me. We had a fun day driving up Angeles Crest and then having breakfast. And he's like, hey, Dad, he was like, you should hire that lady Lyn for the job. And he called me that night, and he's like, I hope this is not weird. It's too late, but would you be interested in interviewing? I called it an audition because it was like an on-camera thing. But he said, would you be interested in the job? And I thought, well, if they're coming to me, then this is different. And I told my friend, I said, hey, listen, I said, they've reached out to me. And she wasn't the only one in the running. But I just said, hey, listen, I think I'm going to put my hat in the ring for this job. And if it's mine to get, great. And if it's not, I don't want it. Like if it's yours or anyone else's, I will be the happiest person on the planet for you. And I think it actually at the end came down to between she and I, which is crazy because it felt like an episode of The Bachelor. Right. I mean, it was really it was really strange. But I did an on camera like a screen test, and it was good for me because I had experience already in filmmaking and in script writing. And I think my now boss was like, you were the only person to ask about post-production and like if you could like look at rough cuts and like what the process would be for like, because no one else just had any knowledge about it. And so I think it was pretty clear that it was a good fit for me. And I kind of balked a little bit at being on camera again. And I was like, this is not really what I wanted to do. Like, this was never the intention. I want to be a writer. Like, what the hell? Like, I'm already veering off of this path. And I said to myself, I'll give it a year. And then I'll go and do something else and I'll see what happens. And I'm about to celebrate my 7-year anniversary with them. It's 100% the best job I've ever had. It's taught me so much. It's not been the easiest job I've ever had. Being on camera is something that is very uncomfortable for me.
To suck it. Okay, suck it.
It's very uncomfortable. It's just not a natural state of being.
No,
it's very weird.
Really awkward.
It's very awkward. And I'm a very introverted person. Like, I'm very outgoing with my friends and people I know, but in a crowd of people I don't know, I am not a mingler. I am not like like, I do not recharge in that way. I am a loner, like, could be in my house. And so I've learned a lot from it. My boss was like, don't ever read the YouTube comments, because the comments, the comments that first came out about me were cruel and were horrible. A lot of them they weren't even about the job that I was doing. They were about me personally.
Oh, yeah, no, they're
my
brutal.
hair, my clothes, my body, my face, my like who's this chick? Where's the other guy? Like, this, she doesn't know anything. She's so stupid, And so I stopped looking at comments for a while until about a couple of years ago, when my boss was like, we need to start moderating the comments, and I'm going to put you in charge of that. And I was just like, please, I think I might have cried on the call. I was like, please don't do that. Or at least give me the opportunity to look at it. And if I can't handle it, like, give it to somebody else. And I think he kind of knew what he was doing, because it was really good for me to look at that. First of all, the actual helpful comments are so few and far between that you're not really looking at it for, how do I improve my car video? Like, that's not, but I think this job has helped give me a little bit of a thicker skin to not take things quite so personally. Like, what are they don't know me at all. Those people who are, making those comments. And it's been interesting over the years watching that, people do like me now, and they do, they are very supportive. And it's been very rare that I've had to delete a comment because it was just like either blatantly sexist or like just like horrible, or like, and I'll do that. I'll be like, yeah, this is not flying. I don't want this out there. And it's the same with my Instagram. I think people are very, very respectful. And there have been a few people who have either been like kind of weird or said things that are gross or like overtly sexual that I want nothing to do with. And I will tell them in a public way, I'll comment and I'll say, there's no room for this here. If you don't delete this in 24 hours, I will. And I do it. And then if it happens again, I block the person. I think it's happened 2 or 3 times in the 10 years that I've been doing this. So I think, I think on so many levels, this job has helped me kind of care less about what people think of me, which I've cared very deeply what people think of me.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough.
It's one of those things. I don't ever plan on leaving. They're going to have to drag me out of their feet first in a body bag.
I mean, it's very flattering to them that, you love your job that much.
I love my job. I love the team that I work with. I can't believe that I get to work with these people every day. Just the video team also in general is so talented and smart and fun. I mean, I'm working with guys like Mike Danger and Jeff Glucker and Tyler Mark. I mean, these guys are so good at what they do, and they're constantly thinking of like, how can we make this better? How can we innovate this? What are the new things that we can do? Like, let's get new graphics here. Like, let's try this. Like, what about this camera? We just hired this amazing camera guy who does all kinds of like commercial stuff and does like running footage for, for huge car companies. And he's just like taken us to the next level, and it's awesome. It's awesome. Yeah.
So what's a project like for you? Like in terms of, is it a vehicle that's coming out? Is it something that's already existing, or is there an order of execution? What's kind of the...
Yeah. So normally we will focus on new vehicles, whether it's a brand new model, like an update, like a mid-cycle refresh, or a completely new generation. Those tend to be, it depends. Some cars get more traction and more interest than others. Stuff like the brand new 4Runner that just came out, a couple of months ago, obviously was a really big one because interest has been building for 15 years on that car. And like, what? Like, where has it been? The Bronco was a huge one for us too. Sports cars, it's interesting because we don't really, like, our market is not really sports, like really kind of heavy in the enthusiast area, but But yeah, we'll take a new vehicle, and depending on its importance for us, like the volume of them, because we're really a consumer facing and a consumer focused, website, that we really do, our first priority is to cater to people who are actually shopping for cars, who want to know more about it in a landscape that, quite frankly, right now, especially right now, has just gotten even more confusing than it was, 6 months ago. EVs, hybrids, what's ICE? Like, I don't even know what ICE is. Like, isn't that the people who arrest other people? It's like, no, it's like, you're just like, wait, what do I do? What do I choose? Like, how do I charge that? What does charging mean? Like, why is it taking so long? Like, why does this one have to plug in and that one doesn't? And I think, so for me,
So, question.
Yeah.
Is that a section, like when you go to the website, is that a section on there, like all these different things?
It's not, but we are really clear with the way that we present our reviews, what each vehicle is, if you can get it as, in any of those different iterations. Because some, if you look, like, so let's say the Camry is sort of brand new, but you can only get it as a hybrid now. Like, there is no V6 anymore. So that's, and I think those changes it goes through those changes, we're very clear, and we are very distinctive when we say, okay, the Prius, yeah, you can get it as just a regular hybrid, but you can also get it as a plug-in hybrid, and here's what that means. And I think for some people, it is probably like an also-ran. It's like, yeah, we know that at this point. But I think for other people, still the learning curve is pretty steep. There are things that's so interesting to see, like over the years, how sometimes you'll be like, okay, I have to explain to people what Apple CarPlay or Android Auto is. But now it's become so much of the, sort of the vernacular, and it's in so many cars at this point. It's like a backup camera. Like, I don't tell people there's a backup camera, because since 2014, you've had to have a backup camera.
Right.
It's like airbags. It's like, really, like,
that's
not a feature. It's like everything comes with one. So really, it's kind of talking about the new vehicle. What's different on it than the previous model? Is it everything? Is it still riding on the same chassis? Like, and again, because of who we talk to, because of our audience, I don't really go into like super deep dives on like the mechanical bits of it and all that kind of stuff, because people are just like, does it go? Does it feel fast? Like, does it not? Will it get me on the freeway and safely? And what are the safety features? How can I plug in my phone? They don't necessarily know what an A-pillar is, but they'll know, oh, visibility is pretty good. Like, you can kind of see out. So it's just a different way of communicating about it. But we get assigned, like, okay, Lyn, you're going to go cover this, and you either do it at the office or you go on the press launch. And then, we cover the cars. I share hosting duties with a couple of other guys on my team. It's not just me. Rinse and repeat, you just you keep doing it and churn through them and try and find interesting ways to sort of say the same things. It's really hard these days to find something bad about cars. Playing field is pretty level, in that everything is pretty good. There are definitely things that I don't like. I think I just did a video on the Mitsubishi Outlander, and I think that is one of the ugliest cars I've ever seen. The face of it is terrible. It's super subjective, because that's just my opinion about it, which is, again, it's another really weird gray area of automotive journalism. But
do you mention that?
I did mention it. And I also will say, look, this is my opinion. You might love how this looks. I don't like it. Here's why I don't like it. And you judge for yourself. I remember, and I figured this out when I was talking about seats and like seat comfort. And I think I said something like, this is the most uncomfortable seat I've ever sat in. And one of the comments in YouTube, this is where it does come in handy, is like, well, I own that car and I sit in it and I love it and it's really comfortable for me. So, what the hell do you know? And while his tone may have been a little bit weird, it made me think like, well, sure, my body shape ergonomically is going to be different than someone else's. So it's always something that, for the most part, I do caveat and say, look, in my opinion, it's this. when it comes to power, or if there's body roll in it, like, and you know, like, okay, this is just how this car operates, then I think it's easier to make those kind of definitive statements. But most of the time I'm trying to be fair.
Understanding that you're trying to be subjective about the stuff, that you inject your own opinion there without being too heavy-handed.
Yeah.
Who's kind of your target consumer and audience when who's mainly going to Kelley Blue Book to see information about cars?
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of people go there for prices about cars. Like that was kind of the staple, right?
Their values. So yeah, so Kelley Blue Book was always traditionally known as a valuer of your car. So you could go in and it was literally a blue book that you could look up your car, the trim level of it, all the sort of the extras that you had on it, any kind of features that you had purchased, and it would give you like the market value for your car. And we're definitely known for that. But Kelley Blue Book was bought by Cox Automotive, which is owned by Cox Media. So we're part of now this massive company. And Cox Automotive owns a bunch of different automotive properties. So they own Auto Trader, they own, I think, dealer.com, they own Mannheim auctions. So there are all of these different things that Cox Automotive offers people now. And so one of those features that we have is they've got this editorial department now that also does content on new vehicles and will help you to shop for a new vehicle, as well as find out what your old one is worth, what your trade-in value could potentially be. And so we sort of are like, we operate all independently, but we also sort of work in concert a little bit, because there'll be an opportunity for you to say, oh, what's a fair purchase price on another vehicle? And then that will kind of direct you to someone at dealer.com who can actually then help you buy a car. So it's kind of like a one-stop shopping place.
So it's about selling vehicles, essentially.
It is now. I mean, yes, it is about, at this point, it's about selling vehicles, and I think helping to simplify the process. Again, the more we kind of get into online shopping, you could literally buy a car. You can buy a car from Hyundai on Amazon now. I mean, it's gotten crazy, right? So I think it's a place to go and simplify the process for people. But mostly our audience is people who are shopping for a car.
What's the age of the people that are usually watching your content?
I don't know that. I know that on Instagram, or not on Instagram, on YouTube, it's probably a younger audience. It's so interesting, and sometimes my brain is like, well, wait a second. Like we're judged on some level by the numbers that we have on YouTube, and yet the content that we make is not necessarily for the YouTube enthusiast audience.
Right.
And so I'm like, oh, you guys, like, what? Because the videos that I'm making about the Camry, I'm not jumping it. I'm not trying to break it. I'm not doing donuts in it. I'm not like, and I think there's a lot of that kind of enthusiast, sort of content that happens on YouTube, especially now. I mean, there's a whole host of people that are YouTubers who just literally go out and they test cars and they go and have, they have a good time and try and do sort of stunty stuff that attracts eyeballs, right? Because that's their business model. So it's kind of this interesting dichotomy. My videos will live on the Kelley Blue Book website, but then they also live on our YouTube channel.
Right.
So we're basically like trying to serve two audiences, which is challenging for sure.
Again, you've been working in editorial for a long time now. There's a lot of consolidation that's been happening.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Hearst picked up Motor Trend and Road and Track.
Well, they've had Car and Driver and Road and Track for a very long time. Right. They just recently purchased Motor Trend, which is really the last of what we used to call the buff books.
Right.
Those are those magazines that you see at the dentist's office that are like the staples, right? That we all grew up reading. So it's really interesting right now. A lot of things are contracting, and the space on some levels is getting much smaller. I think especially when it comes to the print media.
Right.
I don't know. I'm one of those kind of like old romantics who think, oh, it's going to make a comeback because the pendulum always swings. And so there will be another time for magazines. Maybe now is not the time, but there will be a time when people want to sit down and hold something and touch something and spend time with something instead of their phone. That was a really interesting part of the sort of the timeline, is them buying Motor Trend. I don't know what's going to happen there. Motor Trend's such a, there's such a title and a name that everybody knows. They had just teamed up with Discovery to because Discovery wanted their online presence, their YouTube presence, and then they put everything behind a paywall, which was insane to do. I thought that was just such a crazy move. And that didn't really play out the way that they thought it would. And then Velocity TV became Motor Trend TV. And I guess the name is going to stay the same. Who knows?
Right.
I don't think they know. I don't think anybody knows what's going on.
So my fear, I feel like the inevitable is that film kind of went away and everything became digital, that this is kind of the next phase of it. We had met at the Forerunner launch.
Yeah.
And we were both exhausted, apparently communicating in
wind blown, I think is the way, right? Wind burned.
It was brutal.
My gosh.
In the conversations we were having, I was under the assumption that you or someone was upset about not getting an Aston Martin because they decided to give it to an influencer. So tell me the story. So the story you get it right.
So the story, yeah. So we'll make sure the story is correct. So I have an opportunity to sometimes do freelance work for as long as it's not like a competitive, sort of audience or market. Like I would never go do videos for somebody else on new sheet metal.
Got it.
But I'll write about classic cars. Like I do some writing for Porsche Club of America's magazine, Panorama, and I sometimes work for Haggerty on some stuff. And they were putting out a high-end magazine for their top collectors. Anybody who had a collection of $1 million or above, like this special publication was going to come to you. And they reached out to me and they said, we'd love for you to do, how to do off-roading stuff. We would love for you to go do a piece with an off-road, like a luxury off-road vehicle out in, Death Valley and take your, Rebel Rally teammate. And we're going to go have like an adventure in one of those killer, like high performance SUVs. And I was like, great. And the first one that came to my mind was the Aston Martin, the DBX. And I was like, sure, this is one of those like, okay, we can have an SUV, but it has to be a cool SUV that like dad wants to drive too. And so I reached out to them, and I've been really close and had a great relationship with Aston Martin for a really long time. And when I talked to them about this, when I pitched them this idea, they were like, oh, we really like that idea. Like, I think it could be really cool. Like, are you going to take it off-road? And I was like, well, yeah, of course I'm going to take it off-road. And they know me, they know my credentials. They know that I'm not an idiot. And I'm, would always, take care of a car, even in an off-road situation. And then I think they came back to me and they were like, oh, well, scheduling, like, we just can't make it work schedule-wise. And I was like, okay. And then I was a little annoyed because I think I found out that it was going to a podcast, like somebody who had a podcast, and it was an enthusiast podcast. And I get it, tons of numbers, very famous podcast. That's great. Love everybody associated with that podcast. But I was like, wait a second. So you're telling me that you would prefer, sorry, I just hit the mic, so apologies if that just like messed everybody up. But you're telling me that you would rather give the car to the podcast that, yes, granted, has a lot of eyeballs and gets a lot of looks and a lot of impressions or whatever it is that you want to call it. But a lot of those eyeballs are from 15 to 24, they're never going to buy a DBX. Like, they might think it's a really cool car. And yes, it might get you some brand equity with those people. And maybe 20 years from now, they might be able to afford to buy one. But your Aston Martin may not even be a thing in 20 years. That you're going to give that car priority to that outlet instead of mine, which literally is the most targeted audience you could get to for people who could afford it and who potentially would even buy this car. Like I would be really surprised if a bunch of people who had $1 million collection didn't also be like, oh, okay, yeah, like let's time to get a new SUV, honey. What should we buy? Like, oh, that DBX looks really great, and it drives like a mofo. So sure. And I think it's little things like that to me that I just think, oh, okay. Like I don't necessarily understand where the thinking comes that prioritizes that, because the bottom line is Aston Martin, Jag, McLaren, any of those car companies, any car company, they don't stay in business because other people think they're cool. They stay in business because people buy their cars. And yes, you have to still build your brand, and I totally respect that. But at the end of the day, cool or brand recognition doesn't pay the bills. It doesn't keep the lights on. So that was my argument, was it makes me nuts when there's not at least even this just equal opportunity given to both parties. And to be able to say, hey, listen, cool guy podcast over there. Yeah, we really want you to have an opportunity with this vehicle and you'll get it. But there's this other chance over here that we could actually like sell a couple cars. And so we're going to try and do both. But we're going to, because this is more of an open window, right? It's like he doesn't have a deadline the way that I did with print. So we're going to give you the car and then we'll give it to this person second. If that makes sense. That was my argument was, hey, this seems weird to me. As a marketing person, I know what I would do. And it would have been option number 2. Give this person the car because they can write about it to a very targeted client, and then give it to this person and get two for the price of one.
It's interesting because the dynamic of how transactions are taking place is, I feel like the decisions that any executives at any company are making are purely based on statistical data that they have in front of them.
Sure.
So a lot of right now, so companies like Publicis Group that own Saatchi & Saatchi and a bunch of other advertising agencies have picked up companies like Influential and Disrupt that are content creator influencer marketing companies.
Sure.
They have, Influential has 4 million content creators and they're analyzing 100 billion data points daily. And then you have things like programmatic advertising, which is web pages, apps, streaming, all that stuff.
Yeah.
That conversion rate, anything that's not social, is around 1.5 to 3.5, maybe 5% on smaller items. Whereas influencer and content creator marketing, you're looking at anywhere from $13 to $18 per dollar of ad spend. So the return is astronomical in terms of the direction these people are going. And Publicis Group is picking up these companies one after another. They picked up one in July. Recently, they just bought Disrupt because I think that the year before last, you had this big strike going on. They had all these ad dollars that they needed to spend.
Yeah.
And they shifted over to influencer content creator marketing. And when you have 1,000% jump in something or a 3,000% return on something, you tend to keep hitting that button.
Sure.
Which is crazy.
But they have, I'm guessing they have numbers that say this translates into sales for them, and that, I think I saw something once that like Kylie Jenner said something crappy about some brand and 2 million people stopped following the whatever it was. And so I'm sure, I know that they have, I know that they have influence. And maybe my frustration goes back a little bit to what I was saying earlier about the idea of an actor versus, someone who just is on Instagram. To me, it almost feels a little bit like a cheat.
It doesn't feel real, right?
It does not feel real because I'm a person who's always had to put in the work. And I think when you don't, and again, I'm not in any way saying that that being on YouTube is not, or YouTube or Instagram is not difficult, because I have seen how hard these people work. That is not a joke. But yeah, it's just such a different, am I an old lady who's just screaming, get off my lawn? I don't know if that's what that makes me, maybe, but it's just a very different kind of paradigm.
I think the dynamic of what authentic has changed in the last 10 years, but probably more so in the last 2 to 3 years. I think what people view as being real, I think the shiny commercial that the produced television content is something that people are no longer interested in. And companies are seeing that. There's companies like, I bring it up all the time, like Arm & Hammer, that are literally using just regular everyday people to advertise their product to someone else. And the way the algorithms work is they're getting that product and that content in front of those people right before they're making those decisions, and it's converting.
Well, but that makes sense to me, right? Because those people who are using the product are people who actually use the product. So they already have experience in it. They're not just some sort of like fake person who's like, oh, this one's, this is really great. And so that to me makes sense. I think some of the influencer people that I'm kind of like, that the things that frustrate me the most are, again, like, there are people who are on Instagram who will literally just stand in front of a car and go, look at this. This is a 1965 Ferrari. Oh my gosh, it's so beautiful. Look at how this color is just gorgeous. And then they'll like kind of move on to the next car. And I'm like, you didn't tell me anything about the car other than like literally what someone could have told you in 5 minutes. You didn't talk about any of the history of the car. You didn't get in and drive the car. You didn't say anything to me that's not something that I couldn't have looked up on Google in 30 seconds. And yet that person can have like all of these followers on Instagram, and you're like, I'm working my ass off here to try and like teach myself about stuff and learn about things and grind and do the hard work and start at the bottom and all this kind of stuff. Maybe I'm just a bitter old lady, but I think that stuff is the thing that like makes me just go, okay, if there's more importance to that, then I don't want to be that. I don't want to be just style. I want to be substance. That's important to me. So if I have fewer followers than that person, I'm okay with that.
I think people want genuine people talking about how they feel that stuff. And I think that with the younger audience who's got 3 to 5 seconds to listen to what somebody has to say about.
See, that's the other problem. Right. They have 3 to 5 seconds.
We're competing for eyeballs, right?
The ADD is off the charts. And that's another thing I think is just generational. I think for me, it's probably easier to sit still and like dive into something. And I'm not even, great at it. Like I have other friends who will literally sit and listen to something for hours because it's really fascinating to them. I definitely have a window, but it's a little bit longer than 3 to 5 seconds, I hope. Unless I'm bored, then I'm like, okay, that's not for me, and I move on. But if I'm interested in it genuinely, then I'll be like, oh, okay, I'm going to spend more time here.
With all the changes that are going on.
Yeah.
With all the consolidation.
Yeah.
With everything that's evolving. Granted, your audience is what it is, and you've clearly drawn a line in terms of what you want to do and what you don't want to do. So if that medium changes, are you out, or
do you
want to build an online presence?
I don't feel like I've drawn any lines as far as what I do and what I don't want to do. I'm pretty open to almost anything, I think. And it's interesting because my job, even the parameters of my job have changed. COVID, before COVID, we had a production company that would come and they would shoot all of our stuff and they would mic me up and they would do all the beauty shots and all the B-roll, and I would just sort of stand around and, remember what it is that I'm talking about and try and not look hideous. And then as soon as COVID came along, it was like, okay, we have to do this all on our own now. Like we're not going to stop shooting, which was great because some people did. But the production company is gone. Lyn, here's a camera. Now you have to go figure out how to shoot cars. And I was like, say what now? I'm not a shooter. I like taking some photos with my iPhone and I've been able to do it, but video is a whole different thing. And my boss was like, great, you'll figure it out. I'm really confident in you. And it wasn't necessarily something that I was planning on doing. It certainly wasn't something that was like on the checklist of the stuff to, tackle in my lifetime. But, you know, what's that great expression? Necessity is the mother of invention. And I did it and I figured it out. And there definitely are some videos where you're like, oh gosh, the B-roll just looks really, really terrible on that. And there were a lot of times when my boss would come in and because he was doing a lot of the editing at that point, and he would be like, okay, let's take the car out again and I'll shoot some stuff just as backup, which was great. And I really appreciated that he did that. But yeah, but now I'm shooting my own B-roll for the most part. Sometimes I'll have help with me, but if I'm off on a location and I can't bring a shooter with me, it's all me. And the highest compliment I could have ever gotten was, I think on one of my shoots, I think maybe it was a Mercedes. It was was it like the AMG 63? It was anyway, it was a really pretty car. And I found this amazing location and the light was perfect. And I just shot this B-roll that I thought was so epic. And I think one of my editors was just like, hey, like, we'll give a shout out. And he's be like, oh, like Mike Danger's B-roll looks so good. And I was like, yo, I'm like, that was mine. Like, hello. And my editor was like, oh, holy smokes. He's like, it's so good. He's like, I thought it was Mike's. And I was like, yes. I just felt like that was such a win for me.
That's cool.
And that's only happened in the last like several years. So, I mean, listen, if my boss comes to me and says, okay, great, now we're going to have you edit, then I might be like, bro, you do not want to do that, because me and like technology it's a tenuous relationship at best. Like, I'm learning how to use a drone. It's not intuitive for me. I'm not I don't feel like I'm a terribly like kind of computery mechanical person.
Right.
I'm definitely more right brain than left brain. So I might like bristle at something first, but I'll kind of dig in and, you know, kind of dive in with both feet. That's a bad expression, but yeah, no, I mean, unless it was like, okay, now you're going to be making widgets over here that was completely detached from automotive journalism or, you know, the production that we're doing, then I might have an issue with it. But no, I don't say no to much, because I'm not steering the ship. Like, the only thing I can control is my attitude and my effort. I have no control over anything else. So if it doesn't make me happy, then yeah, chances are I would start looking for another job. But everything so far, I'm good.
Where do you see the future of what you're doing?
It's so funny when I'm in job interviews. That's my least favorite question, because I have no idea. I don't know. If you had told me 10 years ago that this is what I would be doing, I'd laugh in your face and be like, yeah, right. I'm going to be writing about cars. That's hilarious. Like, tell me another one. So I have no idea. You know, something could walk through the door that's like, hey, listen, I've got this TV show and you're the perfect person to write on it. Would you come and, you know, be a staff writer on this show? To which I would be like, oh, crap. Okay. Well, let me think about that for a hot second. You know, I just started learning how to play the guitar because it's something that I've wanted to do my whole life. So I don't know what the future looks like. I know that it will probably include me doing some kind of writing. I don't know what it is. I would love to. I've been doing some ghostwriting on some books, which has been awesome. But they're books I never in a million years would have thought that I would have anything to do with. But it's been an incredible experience for me, and I love it. And then I think, oh, well, if that guy wrote a book, like, I could write a book. And so I'm now thinking, I've probably got a couple novels in me. Like, let's do that. Like, that sounds really interesting to me, because it's not movie writing, which is great, but it's very frustrating. And maybe this is another way to do that. So as long as I'm writing, I don't care. I mean, I don't care really what it is, as long as I can get up every morning and say, yeah, let's hunker down and get to it. Because writing is not an easy thing to do. I remember hearing somebody say, look, if there's something out there that you like doing just as much or better, like, do that. Because sitting down to a blank screen, I mean, you probably know this, like anybody who's tried it, it's not easy, especially when you're talking about it like a first draft of anything. It's painful. It sucks. But then once you get it out and you're like, you know, then it's very satisfying work.
I mean, practice and routine tend to, you know, like I have a few YouTube channels where I kind of just spout out short stories and use AI to generate imagery and do text to voice and, you know, just a little dopamine hit online and let it run. And it's, I like
That's awesome. It's a different process for me. I sit down at a blank screen and a computer and I go, okay, like what's coming out? Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not so easy, but you just kind of push through those moments. And that's, you know, that's the great part of the editing process and the rewriting process is you get to go back and you get to fix the stuff that's kind of crap
right.
that you can do better.
So how does AI play a role?
It doesn't at this point.
None? Nothing?
I'm not interested in AI if it's taking my job at all.
Understood.
Like I think there are ways that AI could be really handy and really helpful. I think I've heard like in the medical industry, I think AI could be really consequential when it comes to diagnosing things. But I'm not interested in AI taking over artists' jobs. Like, and I'm sure it's going to happen. I'm hoping at some point that we kind of prioritize people being artistic, because I've seen art, whether it's writing or painting or music, or I've seen it change people for the better. And I would hate for us to kind of relinquish that and just be like, okay, like we're gonna give it up to the robots. There are some really funny things that I've seen, like AI trying to write a Hallmark movie. It's really funny. But I also know that stuff can be really smart. And I will say this, I don't know enough about it to not be terrified of it at this point as a writer. I don't think it will replace people. But yeah, I would probably do everything in my power to try and make it not replace people.
So if they came to you and were like, oh, we want to make an AI avatar of you that review, you know, basically text to voice, that
no.
you end up doing
no.
car reviews in that way.
That's not interesting to me. And I don't think that's interesting to most people. I think there's a big distrust and mistrust of that kind of computer generated stuff. And I've seen some companies that I've done kind of work for use AI and get skewered for it. It's like, how come you're doing this when there's like 25 women out here who would kill to do this job in a second? Why are you relying on this fake BS, you know? So I think there's a lack of authenticity. I think authenticity, especially in this very digital age, is probably going to become more and more important at some point, because it's like, well, who do you trust? Everything can be manipulated. I think authenticity is really important. And I think when everyone out there kind of thinks that there's this sort of tendency to manipulate things, I do think that authenticity is going to end up being really important to a lot of people. At least I'm hoping it is.
All right, 10 questions.
It's time for
10 questions. Is that a yes or no, or what do you think?
10 questions.
What's the biggest adjustment moving from screenwriting to automotive journalism?
The mechanical knowledge. That attention to detail and the mechanical knowledge, because it's really easy to call somebody out that they don't know what they're talking about. Even the difference between saying pound-feet of torque and foot-pound of torque.
Beyond me. What drew you to the vehicles that you own? What do you own?
I own a 1967 Porsche 912, and I own a 2013 Toyota 4Runner. Both vehicles have a mission. The 4Runner is a daily driver, but it also doubles as an off-road vehicle. So there's a purpose. I love its utility. I love its durability. It's stout and steadfast, I think, in the same way that I would consider myself. The Porsche is a project car. It's beautiful, but it's super rough around the edges. It connects me to the first cars that I fell in love with when I was a child. That's why I love that car.
Your parallel parking skills are legendary.
Legendary.
Where did that superpower come from, and what's your secret? What's the...
It's intuitive, baby. My favorite parallel parking story, I was living in San Francisco, and I had to have a car always because I grew up, like if I lived in New York City, I would have a car. These people, finding parking around my place was really hard because it was street parking. And there were these 4 people in a tiny car that pulled out of this spot, and I was like, great, got a spot on my block. They went around the block, came around the block, and watched me get into the spot and literally screamed out the window. They were like, holy shit. They're like, we had a bet going that you weren't going to be able to fit into this spot, and you did. It's all about angles. It's geometry, and you have to know the dimensions of your car. But it's all about the look. And for people who don't look back, they use their rear view cameras or they use all the bings and bongs, they're toast.
Toast. Having written and hosted numerous car reviews, what's the most memorable vehicle you've ever tested and why?
That's pretty easy. The Jaguar Classic, the continuation C-Type. I got to take it a little over a year ago. I got to take it on an on-road classic car rally, and I got to drive it on the track, and I got to drive it on roads in Italy. And this is the rawest car I've ever driven for that long. This thing isn't. I mean, it was an animal. It was so incredible. It's a brand new car, but it's built to the exact specifications of the car that was driven in the 50s. The laws of physics 100% apply to this car. There's no nannies, there's no safety features. We had a 5-point harness, but if we had gotten in any accident, we'd have been dead. I mean, it was that, like, it's that visceral and that raw. And you have to be at the height of your driving skill. And it's the most beautiful thing that you've ever been in. It's like almost painful. It's so loud. It's so small and uncomfortable, but it's just this like fierce piece of art. It's unbelievable. And that, I will remember that until the day I die.
I believe you.
It's amazing. It was an incredible opportunity. I've written, I think, four stories about it. It was really special.
That's cool. What sticks out to you the most from your off-road experiences?
I think the confidence that it's given me as a person, as a driver, as a competitor, as a teammate, as a partner. Yeah. It's something I never in a million years thought I could do, and I did it, and I'm good at it. And I think when you can find those things in your life, you stick to them, and you try and get even better at them. I have a lot to learn. I'm certainly not perfect at it, but the moments when you become one with your vehicle and you're off-road and you literally can feel like what's going on through your feet on like this like kind of incredibly beautiful and rough terrain, like there's no other feeling like it.
With a background in screenwriting, how does storytelling influence your approach to automotive journalism?
Super important to me. I think everything has a story, and I try and every review that I do, you try and have a beginning, a middle, and an end, just like any kind of other story that you would tell. I think it's sometimes harder with car writing, especially it's easier when I'm doing like a feature story, because those definitely have an arc to them. Whereas when you're talking about, oh, this has a wireless charging, and sometimes it's harder to find that kind of that arc or that story. But I'm always trying to make things entertaining. I'm always trying to make things interesting. I know there's guys who will just stand there with a locked off camera and be like, this is this, and look at that. And I think that's great. That's what they do. I I have to try and, crack up or be a little snarky or be a little bit funny, just mostly because I want to be entertained too.
It's important.
So yeah, there's always an entertainment value, I think, to it. And I think that people who watch my stuff, who know me, who keep coming back, I think they enjoy it. I hope they do.
You've attended events like SEMA and the Goodwood Festival of Speed. How do these gatherings impact your perspective of the automotive industry?
I think they're inspiring and they're motivating. I think when you get that many people in one area that are focused on a singular pursuit or interest, the energy is fantastic, especially when you're talking about Goodwood. Either Festival of Speed is fantastic, but Revival to me is like the pinnacle of all events every year. It's classic cars, but it's people who literally will dress in period costume and outfits that also reflect that time period that the circuit was open to racing. And anytime you get that's kind of this cumulative energy and love of something, it's special, and it gets you fired up a little bit, and you're like, oh, I remember why I love this. This is so cool.
As a female journalist in a traditionally male-dominated field, what's the greatest challenge you've faced in your industry?
I think my biggest challenge is just always wanting to be taken seriously. I'm not just a pretty face. I think there have been times when if other women have been hired and they haven't done their own writing, they're just sort of doing presenting. I've never wanted that to be assumed about me. I've always wanted to make sure that everybody knew that anything I say on camera is literally coming from me and from my experience. Just because I probably have more to prove than anybody else. I don't know that I've had to work, twice as hard or 3 times as hard. I think earlier I did say, like, my being a woman has been a massive advantage to me in many ways. And I'm very grateful for that. But I always want people to know that I am authentic and that anything that I say is my opinion and no one's putting words in my mouth.
If you could take one car, any car from any era, for the ultimate road trip, what would it be and where are you going?
Oh, God. That's a hard one. The ultimate road trip. I think I would go back to Italy because I've never seen, the landscape in Tuscany, like driving through that part of the world was like, Italy to me is like being on another planet. It's phenomenal, especially then when you get up to Lake Como. That's one of my favorite places in the whole world, but Tuscany was so extraordinary and so beautiful, and I connected with it so much. As far as the vehicle, oh God. Is it a modern vehicle or is it an old vehicle?
It could be whatever you want.
Might be a near impossible question. There's like 5 vehicles that I would take.
Take 5 then. Maybe it's taking the truck that carries the 5 vehicles.
It could. There's definitely a chase vehicle. I think of modern vehicles, like something that I've driven recently that I just love, that I would love to drive on those roads, is the McLaren 750S. Was a phenomenal car. I loved that car. But then there would be like a touring car too that I would want to take out, like a oh God, this is so hard. Picking one is so hard. I don't know. I'll stick with the McLaren for now, but there, I would love to drive my 912 out there too. I think that'd be awesome. That'd be spectacular. So yeah, so it's an impossible question.
No, it's so yeah. Knowing what you know now.
Yeah.
What advice would you give your younger self?
Don't wait. If you want to do something, do it. Don't put it off. Yeah, don't wait. Just get to it.
Cool. What advice would you have for somebody getting into doing what you're doing?
The same thing. Just do something. Write something. Shoot something. When I was trying to learn about this business, I would go to car dealers and I would lie to them about like wanting to buy a car for my mom and just try and test drive as many cars as I could. I mean, there are ways to do it. I needed to learn about segments. I needed to learn about the different generations of cars, the different, like why this car versus that car. And I had a lot of ground to cover. And I just made up ways to do it. And I think people ask me, they're like, well, how do you get into it? How do you do it? And I say, you just have to do something. Because if on the off chance someone says, hey, like send me something that you've written, you want to be prepared for that. Send me a video, send me a something, start a YouTube channel. You know, it's not easy, but you don't ever know what your path is supposed to look like. So if you're not prepared for it, then it's not going to happen. There were so many opportunities I had when I met people in the business who were TV writers or screenwriters who said, oh, send me something that you've got. And I didn't have anything to send them. I wasn't prepared. And I kicked myself because I think, oh, what if? Like that could have been an opportunity for me. And it wasn't meant to be, because obviously we learn lessons like when we're supposed to learn them. And sometimes we get in our own way so much, but don't wait. Time is deceivingly short.
Where can people find you?
People can find me on Instagram at Lyn with 2 underscores Woodward, because the Lyn Woodward, who is just Lyn Woodward, doesn't use Lyn Woodward. Anyway, so you can find me there. You can find me on the Kelly Blue Book YouTube channel. I'm there with Mike Danger. If you can find my videos on our KBB website, I'll give you $20. I couldn't even tell my mom like how to find them. I'm like, just go to the YouTube channel, because I don't even know how to find them. You can't like search on our website. It's really hard.
Why they don't have reviews by reviewer drives me absolutely insane.
It's same, but I'm not in charge. So yeah, really, Instagram is the only place. I'm not on X. I'm not on TikTok. I'm not on Snapchat. I'm not on,
LinkedIn.
Booter. I'm not on LinkedIn. I got stalked on LinkedIn once, like in a really scary way.
Really?
And I just shut it all down. So yeah, I'm on Instagram, and that is where you find me.
Wow. Okay. Instagram it is.
I told myself I'm going to do one. I'm on Facebook too, but not in a public way. Facebook is my, like, for old high school friends that, that I couldn't recognize them if I saw them walking down the street anymore. Because we've all,
Yeah.
It's a lot of years ago.
Evolved.
We've evolved. Yes. So, yeah.
Thank you for your time.
This was great. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks for the amazing lemon donut. I'm now going to have to go work out because of it.
Well, I appreciate it. And thanks for setting up this space.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this makes me look impressive. Again, I'm not nearly as impressive as you make me seem. So
you do it all on your own.
Oh, thanks.
With that said, that's a wrap.
Cool.
Just fixing